All right, we are live. Well, to be honest, this is the first time I do this exercise of a live show on my own. So it would be nice if I see people joining in. Just feel free to ask questions. And so this is a test. I hope I will do this regularly. Uh, I like to keep it informal. I think there's already so many difficult topics. No, a bit sad. We talk about wars, we talk about geopolitics. It's not always nice to talk about those topics. So I like to keep it casual. So why am I into this? And maybe I can give you guys a bit my background. I've been in China for almost 30 years. And why am I doing this? It's because I've seen Western media to be an- antagonizing China, demonizing China, bad washing, like just doing a lot of fake propaganda when it comes to China. To be honest, I'm very grateful of my experience and the experience I've had in China over all those years. It has become my home, and I think it's a bit unfair when I look at how the Western media are talking about China. So I feel myself as a legitimate voice because I've been here a long time. I speak the language. I came here the first time was in I went to Taipei in Taiwan, and I started actually studying Chinese. So once I had a good foundation after 18 months, I went to mainland China and I started traveling all around, and I've been most of the time in China for the last 30 years. I went a few years back here to Europe, and then I started doing business consulting. So why I started going to geopolitics was mainly when in 2019, when I was in Hong Kong, I started seeing colored revolution happening. We got some people joining in. Jonathan, nice to have you here. Feel free to ask questions. I'll keep it informal. So I'm just giving my background. So I started seeing like this color revolution happening in Hong Kong. It was very clear. I'd studied this actually for a while. I'd seen what they had done in Maidan in 2014 in Ukraine, and it was actually a copy paste. I could see the actors were foreign actors, and the problem that Hong Kong had back then was that there was no national security law. So they took advantage of that. You had basically foreign agents in Hong Kong. They were running around and actually teaching protesters how to make petrol bombs and how to start a revolution, topple the government, stir up problems. It was very clear for me that it was all funded, trained by the West. What scared me the most was I just realized, it's one thing when you look at the media and you say, well, okay, there are tensions, but when it happens in your home and you see how violent it is, because it was extremely violent, you realize, well, this could be the world of tomorrow. We could have, even though it was almost impossible, but it's possible. You can have like those color revolution happening around the world. We've seen this, it happened in Libya. They tried in Iran. They've tried all around the world, and they still, you still have those interventions through NGOs, through George Soros, through the National Endowment for Democracy, which is an extension of the CIA. And so I got a bit worried. I realized that Hong Kong was a proxy war between China and the West, and especially the US. And then you realize, well, we need to pay attention. It's a reality. You see it on the news. Okay, we see sanctions here and there, tensions between China and the US. But when it happens in your home, you realize, well, you know what? You got to speak out. You have a responsibility, and it's not because of my love for China. Of course, I think China has been generous to me. I made it my home. People were fair to me all the time. Um, so so I feel as a human being, I need to tell people the truth. It's not about saying who's right or wrong, but in the case of China, when you learn about history, when you see the reality on the ground, and especially when you start learning about the culture, well, you realize, it's not hegemonic. The history of China has never been about expanding. I mean, in terms of militaristically, or imposing cultures of value. Chinese are very pragmatic. Chinese, they want to do trade, they want prosperity. They're very simple, but very down to earth. It's about tangible stuff. It's not emotional. It's rational. Maybe for the Western people, it might be a bit boring because Western society has become very divided. It's about opinions clashing. It's not about building up a consensus. Having mature people, being very pragmatic, realistic. We are billions of people on this earth. If you are just focusing on one individuals, what we call me, myself, and I, well, how do you build up a society? Well, China is a country of 1.4 billion people. There are 50 nationalities. There's a long history of civil wars, unrest, and there was colonization. China was colonized. There was a big humiliation. We call this the 100 years of humiliation. And they had lands being taken from China. You had colonies. You had 8 countries actually taking bits of China. You had Hong Kong was in the hand of the British, for example. And now what they want is just sovereignty. They want to restore their sovereignty. So they want to have Taiwan to get back to the homeland. They had Hong Kong who came back to homeland. You had Macau. And they want stability and prosperity. The problem we have right now is that we are in a context where you have the collective West, and especially the US, which is very hegemonic. And the collective West overall has had maybe 300-400 years of domination of the world. One of the reasons that China was for thousands of years was the largest economy, the biggest superpower, but China missed the Industrial Revolution. So we had those couple of 100 years where China was not the largest economy, and it was a big drop for China. And you had those tensions with the West. You had also wars. You had the civil wars. Was attacked by Japan. It was very hard. Second World War, I think probably 20 million Chinese died during the Second World War. It was the war against the Japanese, but also civil war. So what Chinese want is that really they want to get back to their original position, but in a sense, it's not about just making a point, oh, we are the largest superpower. It's by definition, when you have the largest population and you have a hardworking population, smart, intelligent, and they want prosperity. What happens is that of course they will become the largest economy. I see like more people coming in. Mark from Australia. You could never wake someone who's pretending to be asleep. Okay. So my story is so China, they want they're emerging again, and now you have the collective West led by the US. They don't want that, and they are going to do anything they can to contain China. I think there's a mistake that people do very often, is that they think that it's about the containment of China. It's not. I see this as a much broader issue. It is going to be a containment about the global South, because ultimately it's not only China. It's about having this globalist new agenda where you have a small minority of elites. It's not about Western people. It's about elites. It's all elites that we are in the West. We are actually victims of already, but they want to take over. They want a much bigger market, and they want to control it, and they want to unify one culture, one market, and just it's going to be about control, But in order to do that, they need to go through different steps within their own society and abroad. Within their own society, they need to deconstruct the human being. You know, this movement LGBT plus plus X, whatever. It's about deconstruction of human being, destruction of family, destruction of values, tradition, history. They want to turn people into slave labor that you can control better. There's going to be a destruction of nation state because it's a global order, new world order destruction. There's no more borders, and there's going to be a big market. Slave labor, people in the survival mode, working very hard 24/7 all the time, and then legalizing drugs, alcohol, people being very sexualized, pornography. I mean, decadence, because you need to deconstruct that. And then you need to have a system of control, control of all those population. So what they're fighting against nations like Russia, like China. When you look at how they are structured, they are very traditional. They know about their culture, they know about their history, and they have family values. It's very solid. So when you talk to them about globalization, it's one thing to be global in terms of trades. We exchange, we travel, we can move to from one place to another. But it's another thing about imposing cultures and imposing. It's a system of control. It's going to be about it's no more like sharing the wealth. It's going to be that very small percentage of elites, globalist elites. When I say globalist elites, it's the people that are behind the World Economic Forum, the Bilderberg groups, the very, very little elites that control the world. And so you have those clashes. It's a clash of civilization, and that's what we're living. So my task here is about telling people about the reality. I'm not saying that China is good or bad or Russia. I'm touching also the topic of Russia. It's just telling about the reality, facts, just giving people facts. And ultimately, when you look at the facts, you realize that we are the aggressor. We are on the side of the aggressors. I mean, when I say we, Western, in the Western world. But again, there's two difference. I mean, we tend to simplify. And we talk about countries, but in reality, it is always thinking. We need to think about globalist elites. We have more people joining in. Mark Bolton from Australia, and Chad Franklin. So that is what I'm doing, and it's just about being factual. After it's not about ideology. I think people they are mixed up completely when it comes to ideology. Ideology can be very dangerous because you put a label. And we should be smarter than that, because once you put yourself into a box, you say, I am green, or I am socialist, or I'm communist, or I'm libertarian. You put yourself in a box. I think we need to have a broader view and try to avoid to have labels. Because ultimately, it's not about, the left against the right. That is BS. You realize that we have so much more in common, left and right. You sit down at a table and you realize that people are seeking the same thing. It's about tangible results. You want to put your kids to school. You want to have food on the table. You want a better life every day. You want to live longer. You want to have access to healthcare. Those are human beings' needs. The real fight is about the fight of the 99% against the 1%. And this is why actually they use constantly the divide and conquer technique. How they can divide us through those labels. Oh, I'm right, I'm left. Or, I am for abortion, against abortion. I am, I don't know, liberal, non-liberal, sexual stuff and gender identity and all other BS. That is how they divide us. And in reality, that is sometimes also the promise of Western democracies, because Western democracies very often is what antagonizing. When you look at how China is addressing the democratic issue, where it is about finding compromises. So you have the tensions, you negotiate, and somehow it's not about 51% against the 49%. That's what we call the mob rule. It's about, okay, we are majority, but how we can work for our interest, but at the same time, look at the whole majority, because we want to have those 49% to come up with us. And at the end, we are going to find a solution together. And that is actually maturity. We got more people actually joining in. There is Coxine. Merci infiniment pour toutes les informations sur la Chine from in French. That is actually from Switzerland. Okay, then hello from fascist California. I don't know about this, but actually, this is a good point. Liberals sometimes, because especially now with with those gender identity issues, they are becoming the new fascists. Actually, we have Derek Tsao coming from China. Mima, boomers in America were raised to hate Russia. Of course. Do you remember, have you ever seen like a movie where Chinese or Russians are portrayed as the cool guys? I like to mention, when it comes to Russia, most of the movies, if it's a man, he's going to be portrayed as a rough man, not very civilized, you kind of a gangster, mafia guy. And if it's a woman, they portray her as a prostitute. And that's the simplification. And if you think about average Joe, that sticks in his mind. It's a reptilian mind. When you've been brainwashed about seeing like a Chinese and Russia not being cool, being someone something not appealing, then it's deep in your subconscious mind. You are going to see Russia and China bad. Okay, why do they teach Russia? Okay, let me see if we can. I don't hate Russia. I was just stating facts about schools in the 50s. Of course. Imagine how many years we've been brainwashed about Russia being bad. And you know what happened? That is what I tell people. It's you take a flight, you go to St. Petersburg or Moscow, or you take a flight or you go to Shanghai. The first 24 hours are going to completely destroy the idea you had about China and Russia. I give you an example. If you go to Shanghai, you are going to find two Pudong airports. You'll see one of the most modern airports in the world. Then you are going to take the fastest train in the world. I think it does like 400 kilometers per hour. And you are going to arrive into Pudong City, Pudong District. Pudong District is a very new district. 30 years ago, it was farmland. Now it's the most impressive place with the skyscrapers, like big buildings, extremely modern. And then you spend the night in the city and you go walk around, eat in nice places. And those 24 hours are going to change completely what you've seen in your whole life about China. That's all you need. What else we got? I used to be a MSNBC addict. Oh, tell me about it. I thought that the Democrats were good at some point. I had some hopes, really. But again, when it comes to the US, it's not, people like the US, the idea of what the US is, but the idea is what it's constructed through Hollywood. The reality is different, and live in the US and look at the reality. Even longevity, the US is the only place in the world where life expectancy is going down. And that's basic human rights. What else we got? Now I watch Angelo Bryan and the three Alex. Oh, my favorites. I'm a big fan of the Duran. They're really, really good people. America is at war. Sadly, the cities are trashed and sick, mentally ill, and homeless and sirens all day and night. That is very sad. I mean, just think about how much money is being spent in Ukraine. Just half that money, you could solve the whole problem of homelessness in the U.S. And it's very sad. And who's benefiting from this? I made a calculation the other day. Those people are stuck with the $100 billion of spent into armaments in Ukraine. It's far, far bigger than that. You need to think about the cost of refugees. We have millions of refugees in Europe. You need to give them housing. You need to give them food allowance every day. Then the cost of disindustrialization of Europe because of high energy cost. A lot of heavy industries are going to move out of Europe. Then energy costs. It costs the consumers, I mean, hundreds of billions of dollars, because now gas is going to be much more expensive. It's going to be gas imported LNG, natural liquefied gas being imported from the US. Now you have many more costs. There's a cost of, so just think about the de-dollarization and the fact that the euro are going to lose their status because we seized Russian assets. Now Europe is no more trusted. So euro and the US dollar, they are going to lose their position. So I think, and then it's going to be reconstruction of Ukraine. Reconstruction of Ukraine is probably $1 trillion. So it's far more than the $100 billion of weapons we send there. There's going to be the cost. The EU is going to actually, if Ukraine gets into EU, there's going to be payments of the EU of roughly $20 billion every year. To give you an example, Poland is the largest net recipient of EU aid, and they get $17 billion every year. If it's Ukraine, it's going to be $20 billion per year, and probably for a period of 20 years. 20 years, imagine that. So here the cost for Europe is going to be in the tens of trillions. In addition to that, Europe is going to increase its military spending for the next decades, because now the level of spending in military spending in Europe is under the 2% of required by NATO. So the price, the cost, it's crazy. I made a calculation, $10-20 trillion over 20 years is going to cost the average citizen in Europe between $20,000 to $40,000 over a period of 20 years. What do we got there? Question. Very good friends with Patrick Lancaster. Yes, I had Patrick Lancaster in my channel. I haven't done much interviews on this channel, but I had Patrick Lancaster before the special military operation, actually. It was very touching. This guy is amazing. And I felt what he's going through is very tough. It's just he's dealing with corpses. He's been dealing with corpses for the last 8-9 years. Just because the shelling in Donbass started in 2014. That's what people tend to forget. Question, Angelo, how about pics in Western media about China? Like Chinese still wearing masks 24/7, CCTV. It's funny. Ultimately, we can have our opinion about China, but the way China is managed, its political system, its society, who is best to judge that? Only Chinese. So you see, the problem is that whenever we are watching, we are paying attention to something, we have our lenses. And if I go to China, I'm a guest. But then I can ask Chinese, what do you think? And then when you have most of Chinese, I'm talking about 95% of Chinese, they love their system. They do. Well, they have their reasons, because this system has delivered great results. And those are factual. It's very factual. In 40 years, the CPC has lifted out of extreme poverty 800 million people. we are talking about this is one of the biggest achievements in human history, and they know that. They know that the last generation, how they were living, and now the kids are living much better than the parents, and that is also the trajectory, because there's planification in the CPC. They are not thinking in terms of the next election term, but they are thinking in terms of next generations. And this is the problems we have in the West. What are the plans for, in terms of society? What do we want to achieve? Do we have a dream? I mean, really, the problem is that there are lots of, they talk a lot about emotional slogans, let's build up a society and so on. In China, it needs to be tangible. So they have plans of the next 50 years. And you can see, just in terms of infrastructure, what they've built in China, just amazing. So you can see it. In the West, especially the US, it's not about bringing new stuff. It's about taking care of the thing that has become really old. So, just to give an example, if you go to the metro in New York, it's one of the worst in the world. It's extremely old. Then you go to China, those are the most modern airport, infrastructure, road, everything. So if you're a taxpayer in the US, you pay taxes and you think, where are my taxes going to? Not only my life is getting worse and worse, but where are my taxes going to? Because you cannot see that, right? You are in China, you can see, well, you know what? I'm willing to pay my tax. Why? Because infrastructure is getting better. Longevity is getting better. Everything, those tangible stuff, you can see them in China. See what we got here. The lives in China and Russia should, okay, I lost it. In the past virus, before COVID, people in Asian countries were wearing masks, not just for pollution, but other flu viruses. Yeah, this is one of the things that in the West we don't understand. I'm not for the mask. I mean, and this is not my topic. I don't like to talk about COVID. But in Asia, people wear masks when they are sick. It's very counterintuitive for Westerners. We think that you wear a mask because you need to protect yourself against the others. In Asia, it's about thinking about the other. You have a flu, you protect the others. So you wear a mask. So you see, it's not, individualistic would be, I think about myself. Who cares? I'm sick. Who cares? Well, then in Asia, it's different. You're sick. You have to think about, in terms of society, your actions are going to influence your neighbor and society. Amazing. Jonathan would love to visit, maybe in the next time. Okay, that's not for me. US infrastructure is a joke compared to the Chinese one. Absolutely. My taxes are going for war. Yeah, absolutely. So I wouldn't be willing to. I'm glad I live in Asia. At least, it's good life. I mean, right now I'm in Hong Kong. Hong Kong is not, it's a bit different than in the mainland China. But I could understand that the frustration in the West to have taxes going for war. Brian Balletics, the Durand, Patrick Lancaster, Jackson Hinkle, and you, Angelo, are real heroes. Thank you, guys. Here in the States, we try to cough and sneeze in our arms. Glad it's gone, actually. COVID was a nightmare. So, yeah. So I think it's important to talk about those differences. So this is why you have YouTubers like me and others that been living in a while in China. They're coming out, and it's not about being blind. Having blindness about China. China is it's the best place and so on. But it is hard. It is hard to find problems, major problems. Well, there are problems, yeah, but once you look at the challenges that China have, you start realizing that actually they're doing pretty well. But just because it's a huge country, it is a huge country. But the interesting thing is that the system is, you see how in the West, In the West, people are unhappy, they get frustrated, and whoever they elect, they're not following what they want. So they get frustration, lots of frustration. And so people are not happy. Probably around 30% are satisfied with the system. What China does, they have a system of surveys. There are tens of thousands of surveys every year, and they actually trying to sense anticipate what are the problems, what people want, and then they discuss internally. You have divisions and so on, and they find actually, they start with new laws, new initiatives. So you see, they anticipate, and this is, but you need to be close to the society. While in the West, we have our politicians that are actually telling us what we want to hear, so they get elected, but ultimately they are going to listen to whoever funds them. And once they are elected, well, they don't even manage. They already think about the next election. So they are not working for managing the country, but they are working to be re-elected. What can China do to next increase economic growth? Okay, now the growth in China economy is actually slowing down. It's what we call soft landing. China is also, they are influenced. China is influenced by the world economics. So if the world is doing well, of course, China is going to be influenced by that. So there's a correlation between the rest of the world and Chinese economy. So now a lot of people are saying what China is doing, not doing well, but in reality, China is doing, the growth. The latest figures are 5.2%, I think. Of course, China has its own problems. There's real estate, it's slowing down. But again, you have double-digit growth since 1980s. So it's not sustainable. And again, in terms of percentage, in terms of, it has to decrease because the mass is much, depends where you start from. When you have a small economy and it's very early stage, then you can do 20% growth, there's no problem. But when you have the mass of Chinese economy, it's going to not plateau, but it's going to slow down. And actually, I think the latest figures when it comes to large economies, I think India has a slightly higher growth than China, and then right after there's China. So they're saying China is not doing well when well, look at Europe and the US. They're really not doing well. So and then I would say, just we need to be careful. Those concept of GDP. There are lots of distortion, and I would say that Chinese GDP and Russian GDP is much more solid because in the West we have a lot of inflated GDP. That's what we call the financialized economy, and it's not much industrial based. I mean, it's industrial based that's very solid. When, let's say, if you are into war economy, well, the service, the first to suffer are going to be the service. So if you have 60% of your economy which is service, it's worth nothing. What do we got? Good evening, Ray. In Switzerland, Germany, the propaganda is all about Chinese organ trafficking and Tibetan and Falun Gong persecution. All right, where do I start from? Organ trafficking. Actually, those rumors was from the Falun Gong, and actually it's an entity which is actually financed by the US AGM, which is the propaganda arm of the US. And inside you have Voice of America, and they're actually financing and sold the Falun Gong. And the Falun Gong with the Epoch Times, they were the ones to tell about those stories about organ trafficking, which is just absurd. Tibetan, that's a huge topic, but I've been to Tibet quite a few times. First time was 30 years ago. There's a lot of misunderstanding, and people just don't know about the history of Tibet. If you talk to Tibetans, where they were slaves before the liberation by the communists, they were slaves. Their 90% were slaves. There was no literacy. Life expectancy was a bit more than 30 years old. Then you have so Falun Gong. Falun Gong is a sect. What can I say? It's a sect. It's a so it's was introduced and financed by the U.S. and there was a they wanted to stir up. It's just a way to meddle into Chinese society and part of the color revolution agenda. So you have the Western media inside China, you have some NGOs, you have the Falun Gong, and you put them all together. And the idea is to create some type of color revolution, which, by the way, China had in 1989, Tiananmen Square was a color revolution. More should be done to expose the shortcoming of the internal divisions of the US to counter anti-China bashing we see non-stop in Western media. Well, what can you do? There's a budget of $500 million on creating bad propaganda, bad image of China, and especially to demonize the Belt and Road Initiative. So when you have a country that is willing to spend $500 million, that's a Congress bill just to do anti-China propaganda. So basically that budget, that's a huge budget. They can go to any, let's say, YouTuber, they say, well, you do this video and I give you that, or they can give a lump sum to some media and say, well, you need to do that many stories, and that's budget. That's massive, and there's also lots of budgets like this that are going into those countries that bought into the Belt and Road Initiative, and especially Africa. What do we got? Tom, the West is fixated on the growth of China. What about the growth of the US? There's no comparison. It's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting. Why would you just focus on what your neighbor is doing? It's interesting. Just think in terms of human being. Your neighbor is doing badly, but you're doing worse than him. But you're still happy that he's not doing as well as he used to. I think this is the strategy of the loser, really. So, yeah, I'm glad I'm getting to the 37 minutes. I thought it was a tough exercise. I was a bit scared just talking with in front of the camera. But it's nice to have people joining the stream. And I hope I can do this regularly. I like casual talk like this, not necessarily too structured. I'm still getting messages here through the eyes of Aka. Anya is Polish lady who's very interested about Eastern Europe. Okay. His name is Matt Bolton. No, so I was saying it's an exercise that I need to practice a bit. I like the style of Alex Cristoforo. I think he's amazing, and I hope that this setup I can apply this to some videos, live videos, maybe inside Hong Kong, so we can talk about geopolitics. I can talk about China in general, and more in a casual way. We have Natalia. Angelo, take Brian and come for a visit to Moscow and St. Petersburg. I would love to. I've been to Russia. Actually, I went all the way to Siberia. I went to Irkutsk, Ulan-Ude. It was just amazing. Amazing. What a nice people. Amazing. I think every single country is extremely interesting. I couldn't tell you the nicest country I've been to. We got more messages coming in. Thanks, Andrew, for being part of the truth. Thanks for your hard work. Thank you. Thank goodness for YouTubers like you. Yeah, thank you. I'm doing this because other friends are doing it, and I think we need to stick together. And I think, I don't know, maybe it's the age. We're not seeking like exposure. We think about doing what is true, what is, just being aligned to who we are and with justice. And I think somehow when it comes to me is if I can teach something to my kid is to be who I am. It's by my actions that I can be an example. It's not about telling him what to do. It's like Gandhi used to say, be the change you want to see in the world. So you need to start with yourself. Be that example. I would love to see a walk and talk in Hong Kong with you. Yes, that's in the plan. Yes, indeed. Thank you, Angelo, Brian, Alex, Cyrus. Yeah, all my friends. Cyrus is a cool guy too for bringing news from China. MSN have nothing good to say about China. Well, sadly, but I still have some hope. But you see, even this video, probably the algorithm is not going to be in my favor. There's many media that are pretty much banned. There's Facebook, Instagram. It's only lately that actually I have some exposure on Twitter, just since there's Elon Musk who took over. But otherwise, it's getting harder and harder. We'll have to go through different platform. And again, it's just this is not my main job, so I don't make much income from this. I have another activity, but I would say if you are alternative media, it's hard to make a living. So what people do, they go through Buy Me a Coffee, Patreon. By the way, I have a link in my video, but so that's what people do. It's not easy. Money is not on the China-Russia side. Sometimes people joke. I mean, not joke. They say, "Oh, we are paid by the CPC." They call us the UMA. We take money from China and Russia. I tell you, if they are listening to me, you are stingy. You are stingy. You don't pay. But it's not about this. It's about doing what is right. What will China do to revive international tourism? China is starting to travel. I think I've seen something about a visa in China. Now they're trying to do some kind of visa on arrival, or this visa where you can stay in a few places. I think it's Beijing or Shanghai, where you can stay 7 days. So not complicated to go to China. But I wish they would make it longer. So they need to do something more about this in China. Just make it easier just to travel in China. But it's going to happen just gradually. Also, YouTube trying to censor, defund independent journalism like the Grey Zone, of course, with GoFundMe. What did they do there? They actually but they blocked their GoFundMe money. And I think Max Blumenthal found another solution to raise money. Kaksin, thank you so much, Angelo. We are grateful for your sharing. I'm so glad to discover the bright side of China and Russia, and very disgusted by all the Western lies. But you see, it's funny how sometimes the people, they think I'm doing this for China and Russia. Yeah, maybe. But I think I love much more my country. I feel ashamed of what my country is doing when I see what it's being done in China. Really. So I think that what I can say good thing about China, but if this can influence my country and we can actually take care of our own problems, start from our own country, make you whatever country better again. I don't know, but this is important. So I do wish countries could take example of what is being done in China. You don't need to replicate, but you can be inspired by what China is doing for its people, for the people, right? Lots of Chinese came here during the dark times. I wonder if they will want to go back. Yeah, that's difficult. The life of immigrants is not easy. Not everybody immigrates, go abroad for the best reasons. I'm thinking, well, when you look at the immigration, let's say from Africa going to Europe, it's a economic. It's because we destroy the economy there in Africa. We actually steal everything. We buy natural resources for nothing. We just make sure they are kept poor, and then we create also civil wars, and that's why we have these problems of refugees and and immigration to Europe. And the idea is actually it's part of the destruction of nation state, but also having cheap labor to be used as a kind of slave labor into Europe. And because you have cheap labor going to Europe, the existing labor there in Europe has pressure. It's being pressured in terms of salary levels. So you see, you are destroying your workforce too. So I think going abroad because you want to, and for the experience, yes. But this immigration, which is economic immigration, because you're starving at home, I would take care of the problem of starvation first. Why we keep the global south so poor? Why people are willing to be? We are willing to do this human trafficking and using them as a slave labor. That's not humane. It's very counterintuitive. People think that let's take them over, and because we need to be humane. It's not. We not need to look at the roots. If you're an African, you love your country, you'd wish you'd stay in Africa, because the life of immigrant, it's not fun. You are going to have a miserable life in Europe and work very hard. You're going to be used, while you'd prefer to be in your home and be surrounded by your friends and family. And I'm talking because I'm a second generation. My parents are Italians that immigrated to Switzerland, so I know what it means to be immigrant. My parents were sad to have left Italy. The West is an embarrassment. Yeah. What else? Angelo, what position do you believe China would take if direct NATO-Taiwan ties are seen? Well, they'll keep on pushing there are red lines when it comes to Taiwan. I would say there's one red line is Taiwan declaring independence. Second red line would be nuclear weapons in Taiwan. And the third one would be massive presence of US armed troops. So let's see how crazy it gets in Taiwan. Let's hope Taiwanese are looking to how the collective West is using Ukraine. So I just hope that they will not fall into the trap that the US wants them to fall into. What else we got? Now the US is trashed. Many want to leave. Millions have expatriated to Mexico. I would love to leave this country now. It's a pity. It's a country with so much potential. It's been hijacked. It's been hijacked by a minority. And it's no more democracy. Really, we need to look at the roots of the word democracy. Democracy is a demokratos. It's Greek. Sorry for my Greek pronunciation, but it means power to the people. It's not. You have the elites, US elites. They wrote the rules of the game. So when you have a democracy and you get to write the rule of the game, you are going to control the game, because you are going to make the rules that makes you win every time. What is your opinion of gold? Gold is the best. I shouldn't advise, but I think it's safe. Just look at the performance of gold. You take a chart, 5 years chart, and you see the performance of gold is around 7-8%. But the function of gold is to hedge yourself against inflation. So the performance is going to be pretty much inflation. So when there's high inflation, it's very advisable to buy gold. And I think more and more, if we are going to this BRICS currency, maybe it's going to be backed by gold, most probably. So gold is going to get back its importance before the 70s. 70s was when Nixon actually dropped the peg of the dollar and gold. So the dollar was backed by gold. China seems to recommend their population to look at gold and silver. They have silver banks. Yeah. Actually, when you look at the West, see, they're just making sure they don't make it easy for you to buy physical gold. You can buy funds, but it's really hard to get physical gold. So I would say an extra security would be just to buy physical, not a paper gold. What do we got? Gray zone are really good. Of course they are. Yes. Demon crazy. Yes. Hijacked by imperialists. Yeah. The US won't be able to keep the stake that high for a long time. They will have to introduce fake like lockdowns or something. Yeah. But you see, they come up with something all the time. I don't know. 9/11 could be one trigger. Distraction, big distraction. Maybe they'll come up with if their society is going to collapse, then they are going to say UFO. They need to find ways to build up fear. Fear actually is the best tool for control, and COVID is was one tool. Which, by the way, I don't like to touch the topic COVID, but if you have a pandemic, that's one of the best way to control society. You can issue laws that restrict your freedoms. Same as 9/11. 9/11, there was a Patriot Act. There were lots of laws against freedom that were enacted. So we need to be very careful. That's how they do. They create instability, fear. Sometimes they instigate the chaos. There's chaos, people get tired, and they're like, well, do something because you don't want the chaos. Then you have laws that are enacted that are going against your freedom. That's how they do it. I'm disgusted that Australia is sending military equipment to Ukraine and the initial propaganda. No, the subject is almost taboo. Yeah, they are going to make it illegal to talk about some subject. That's how they do. Sometimes they make some people a few examples. So let's say Assange is an example. So if you are a journalist and you see what is happening to Assange, you might think twice when you have sensitive documents in your hands. Or they are going to seize your account. Nigel Farage in the UK, they actually banned him from having a bank account. If you don't have a bank account, you cannot do anything. So, and those are tests. They did the same as the truckers in Canada, the Freedom Convoy. They actually seized money, They did the crowdfunding, they seized money. So we see where society is going towards, and probably the central digital currency is going to be about more control. Just imagine you have money in this central bank, and they actually can overnight they can say, well, we need to take $10 from each of you guys, or they can do anything, and everything will be tracked and will be records. Here in Switzerland, Germany, many people are living the same nightmare. I live in Hong Kong. It's not too bad, Switzerland is relatively okay, but again, just it's a neutral, but it's a bit high. It needs to sometimes to do things against its own sovereignty because it has no choices. And we have also the banking lobby, which is very powerful, and the US is putting a lot of pressure on the banking, which are in return making pressure on the political. Would you advise foreigners to make bank accounts in China to hold yuan currency? I come from the finance industry. I mean, private banking. It's about diversification, and I would say the more uncertain things are, the more you need to go into tangible things. So for example, if I was in Switzerland, I would say, maybe real estate. It's tangible, you can touch it. Gold, but it's about diversification, meaning you don't put all your eggs in the same basket. I wish we could teleport Assange. Poor Assange, yeah, absolutely. Buy tangible things. All right, guys, we are getting close to 1 hour, but it's as a first test, it was really nice, and it's nice to have people live for my first show. And what I would say, just keep yourself informed. Again, I think most of you guys are already following the people I will advise you to follow: Brian Belletics, New Atlas, The Duran, Alex, Reportify, Cyrus Johnson. So we are a bunch of people doing that. And but again, it's great to have people supporting, following. And so keep yourself informed, and thank you. I don't know what they say. They say put a like and share. But it's always a great experience for a first live show. Thank you, guys.